Hello and welcome to the Virtual Speaker Success Summit. I'm your host, Erin Lomanjek, and today we have something fun and exciting. I can't wait. Chris is a comedian who teaches. His workshops have been featured on international events like South by Southwest and STEP, and he's performed at music and comedy festivals in over 50 cities. What I love about this guy is we met in the streets of Clubhouse, and sharing a stage with people in that app has really been so amazing. You'll see throughout this entire summit, some of the people I've literally only met on Clubhouse. So it's fun to actually put faces to names and not just a little picture that you see in the app. But I'm super excited because Chris has so much to offer and he's so funny. And I just am so grateful that he said yes to come in here, not only do a session, he's actually going to do a live workshop for us later this week. So I'm excited to have him here. Thank you so much for joining us, Chris.
Oh, I'm so stoked to be here. Erin, I didn't only say yes to this, I said hell yes. I couldn't say it fast and hard enough. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so tell me, how did you become a comedian? It's not like you woke up when you're a 5-year-old and said, I'm going to be a comedian for my life. That's what I'm going to do.
I know, right? It's my journey. I remember, I think regular kid stuff. Like I wanted to be an actor, or like I wanted to be like Jim Carrey. And it's like, what did Jim Carrey do? Oh, he was a stand-up comedian. Okay, so should I be a stand-up comedian? And then like that dream evolved into I wanted to be a hidden camera show actor. And I was like, okay, well, how do I do that? And that's a very specific, weird dream. But then I was told like, oh, those people all take improv classes. They're all improv comedians. So I was like, okay, let me take an improv class. And that's how I got going where I am now. But yeah, in the beginning, you're right. No one is a kid thinking I want to be vulnerable on stage and do public speaking and hope that people laugh at it, right?
Or laugh at you. Like that's the thing.
Right.
And Jim Carrey, people laugh at him, how he embodies comedy, right? And so it's really like, yeah, come and laugh at me. And most people would not want to be in the spotlight to be laughed at, right? So it takes a special kind of person.
Yeah, it takes a certain amount of, some combination of confidence, but also being willing to put yourself out there and just not not letting the negativity get you down because we all deal with negative stuff, but when you are putting yourself out there on in the context of a comedy stage, you're saying, I wrote this stuff, I think it's funny, I hope you group of strangers think it's funny. That is understandably terrifying.
For sure. No, and I love it because I think the one thing that speakers should be doing is really crafting their stories. And so looking at their life and every experience as a story. I'm sure as comedians, you're always looking for new content in your life and what's happening around you. So tell me, how do you look at the world that way, that you're like, oh, this would be really good to put in a skit, or things like that? How do you see the world that way?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And you're right. We definitely are looking at it with a certain lens, like what kind of material can I get from this? And it depends on what your aesthetic is as a comedian. I think the most traditional one is people who are angry and want to find things to be mean about, right? My vibe is very different from that. I'm much more optimistic about the world. But when I'm looking at everyday life and different things happening that I can mine for comedy, to me it's more about like the truth in comedy. It's like the truth is often funnier than something that you can make up, and so it's the same reason behind why if you saw someone like actually trip and fall and like smash an important like piece of art or like a wedding cake, like that is a different kind of funny than someone who falls on a banana peel on purpose. It's like manufactured comedy versus like, oh my God, that's so funny because it's true. So my vibe is more, having my eyes on the realities of the world and interpersonal relationships and what is funny or weird or absurd about that.
I love that. But I think it's really true. I mean, as speakers, we need to be sitting down and looking at all of our stories. I always say, have a story journal. And I think the same is kind of necessary when you're thinking about anytime you're up on stage. You need to know how to relate to the audience. And so really looking at stories. And it's funny because you think about it. I wrote down the story about my daughter cutting her bangs. She's 5. She cut here, and right here. So she had like half hair here, and then her bangs were missing up in the middle. And she didn't start on the side. She went straight to the middle for some reason. And I'll never forget, I took a picture of her because she's like this. and her hair. And I was like, honey, what happened? And she's like, I cut my hair. And I was like, and underneath, I'm like, yeah, I can see that. I don't know, I'm gonna fix it. But I just, and I literally just had a conversation with her about, well, we make mistakes and it's okay if we make mistakes as long as we learn from them. Do you want to cut your hair ever again? No. Okay, great. Then you learn from it, right? And I was like, thank God she said no. I don't know what she would have said. But then she grabbed her Barbie, and her Barbie had like maybe 3 or 4 hairs just sticking right out the top. That was it. The whole rest of the hair was gone. And so I put those on social media, and I, said it was a personal, it was like one of those personal development moments for a 5-year-old. But at the same time, that story is so relevant when you think about all the other things. Like, where else do we make mistakes like that? Where do we feel like we could be laughed at for a mistake we made? Because walking around with your bangs up here is kind of humiliating, right? So, like, finding all these things. And so I think as stories unfold for you, to write them down and then later go, okay, what was the point of this? What did I learn from it? What did I glean from it? And sometimes we're still in the story, especially if it's something difficult. Like, my mom had heart issues this last week. And so I dropped everything and was with her for the entire week, taking care of her. And it's like those moments, right? And you're like, okay, what did I glean out of that? What did I learn from that? But if you're still in it, keep writing until you can figure out what is the light at the end of the tunnel, right? What is the message that I can share with the world? And so then you have this book of all these stories, and after you write them, then they kind of become top of mind. So if a client comes up and says, hey, tell me about a time you really had a mistake, you're like, oh, right?
No.
So thinking about that, right? And so the same thing is probably true for what you do as well.
Absolutely. We have a saying in improv classes where we go, there are no mistakes, there are only gifts. I know it's very a stoicism way of looking at improv comedy, which maybe seems like a non-stoic activity, but it actually really, really is. So the improv scene, one person says something the wrong way or mispronounces a word or has a strange response to something. It doesn't seem like it was real. We train our students to take that and incorporate it into the reality of the moment so that it becomes real, as opposed to, if it happens one time, it's a mistake. If it happens more than one time, it was on purpose. Now it's a game. And now we're playing this game and the audience is probably laughing at whatever this game is. So I think it's a really great takeaway for improv that dovetails nicely with speaking and storytelling and all that. It's like, we're also really good at finding patterns, like detecting patterns in the way people talk and patterns and perspectives and behaviors, and using that as content for storytelling or whatever.
Yeah. So I would love to hear more about how people can take, why would a speaker want to take some improv? For me, one of the things that I know is, like, I'm funny, and I am really funny at one line, quick lines. I am just so good. Like, you picking out something that someone said and totally rolling with it. And then it becomes the joke, and then it becomes the whole group's joke, like all of that stuff. I'm good at that. But I've always wanted to learn how to set up a joke, because I don't really know how, and other than knock, knock, right? The little jokes you tell as kid, like my daughter, knock, knock, apple who? Door. I'm like, oh, ha, ha, you're so funny, right?
Pretty good joke.
So why would somebody think that this would be really, something that they can hone their craft a little bit better and get better at? I think even just feeling an audience, right? Because in improv, you gotta kind of feel the audience, and you start to kind of act it out, because you get comfortable finding those pockets of them, right? And figuring out what makes them laugh and happy.
Absolutely. I think it's a little bit less like learn how to write a joke and incorporate that, and it's more of the overall vibe and energy. It's like understanding the structure of a joke, being able to read a moment or read a room, being able to find the truth in comedy. All these things, it's a little bit denser than what I think people first think of when they think about learning comedy. It's like more about formulas and being in the moment than you realize. But once you have these skills, you kind of become bulletproof in a way when it comes to being a charismatic communicator, because you feel like nothing can shake you off of the momentum that you've got built. Nothing can change what you are trying to deliver to your audience right here, right now, which I think is an important thing for speakers of all kinds. And you know, I say something in the beginning of every improv class I teach that is designed to put people at ease, but it also is very, very true, which I say, This is not about you being the funniest person in the room. Like if you come do these exercises and thinking that I'm about to be the funniest one, I'm about to say the funniest stuff, you actually will become like you'll take away your listening powers. You won't listen as much to your scene partner. You won't adapt. You won't be as flexible because you'll be going out for yourself. You won't be thinking about the unit. And these are all techniques that we teach in a traditional improv class that I think has a ton of real life implications and and it can help out with your business or speaking career. If you step out and if you're trying to be funny, that's when stuff gets forced and it feels inorganic. But if you're able to like exude this confidence of like, I think that I'm funny when I need to be, or I know when the moments are to be funny. I know how to be funny when this happens or when that happens. That's when you become an unstoppable speaker.
Yeah, and I think it's right. I think also just knowing how to read an audience. I think a lot of times when we go into speaker mode, people are like, okay, I'm taking the stage. I got my speaker suit on. I got my speaker face on. I always say my speaker voice too, because sometimes the people just totally shift when they get up on stage, and who you see down here on off stage and who you see on stage are two different people. And it's like, so I think it's really important to know how to walk into a room and sense what's going on. And I think one of the other things is setting yourself up for success. Excuse me, by listening while you're in the audience. Come a couple hours early, sit in the sessions before you, because you could use that. And other speakers are going to love when you say, I loved when Chris said blah, blah, blah. And when Monica was over here and she said blah, 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 because now they know that you're going off script. That's not a scripted talk. And I think that's what also adds a layer of complexity and expertise when you can do that from stage, because you know what the feel of the room is. You know that they really laughed when Chris fell before he got on stage or whatever, and you can continue that. But that, I think that listening, like you said, is so important to also reading a room. I mean, I'm an empath, so it's not hard for me to walk into a room and know the heck what's going on real quick. But I think that also makes me kind of like a superpower now, thinking from stage. So if I see all these people in the doomy face, all right, what do you got? Then you know, okay, well, we're gonna have to break the ice here,
Yeah.
and get them to move. That's when I always ask a question at the beginning, because then I get them to get their arms uncrossed, and then they're like, oh wait, no, I can't cross my arms again. Engaged me.
Whoops.
But
Yeah, I totally agree. I think listening is like the secret weapon when it comes to comedy and so many other things. It's kind of like it's not a real sexy characteristic. People aren't like reading books about listening. They're like, it's like, yeah, I listen every day. I'll practice that when I can. It's not like, I don't know. It's not like there's so many other topics that people gravitate towards, but really
on
listening.
my what would be like, we were dating website, I'm a great listener. That's not usually what somebody says. Let's be real.
Right. And so when someone comes and watches a comedy show, they're watching this like killer improv group that is just like their group mind is insane. They are perfect, so funny. People aren't going up to them and being like, wow, you guys really listen to each other. They're not saying that, but that is why it was so good. That is why they were so successful on stage. So when you learn improv, it prioritizes listening in a way that not very many other art forms or creative exercises do. You will sink in an improv scene if you are not listening, and and you stick out so bad. And so it puts pressure on people to be good listeners, which is a good thing, and it leads to more fun stuff. So even if you're listening to this and if you're like, that doesn't sound like fun, like prioritizing listening, it's like, well, the better of a listener you are, the more your ideas will be heard by whoever you're talking to, and the more their ideas will be heard by you. And that just creates a relationship and a dynamic that is very uniquely qualified to make a bunch of people laugh and pay attention.
Well, and listening, if you're a coach, consultant, I mean, if you're a service provider and you're selling your services, you better heck be really good at speaking, at listening, because you have to hear their language. If they say, I want to go to the top of the mountain, you're like, great. Guess what? In my program, I'm going to take you to the top of the mountain. You reflect back their language. And if you do that, they feel like, man, this person is speaking to me. Even if you're in a whole room of 10,000 people, she's speaking to me, because you're using their language. You're using what are the things that are keeping them up at night? What are their problems? What are the things that, even in their language, I hear so much limiting language with people. They're like, well, I'll try to do that, or I'm trying to write my book. I'm like, no, then you're really not, right? Because you're trying to tell me you're trying, right? And there's no such thing. You can't try to write a book. You're either writing it or you're not, which most of you means you're not. You're just trying to look like you are, right? So it's really this thing about listening. You can hear, like when I listen to people, I can figure out, oh, there's a mindset issue. I have an application when people want to work with me, and one of the questions is, how much do you make? How much do you want to make? What are your goals? And why do you think you haven't gotten there? And how much would it be worth to solve that problem? So here's the thing in that. The fun thing is that you can say, okay, how much do they make? And if they want to make, okay, there's a gap of 50 grand. Then below it says, I'd pay $2,000 to get that problem solved. I know that there's a money issue at play, right? Because the way they answered that makes no sense. If you know it's a $50,000 problem, you'll throw $50,000 at it if that's what it takes, right? If you knew that that's going to just increase everything else. So the funny thing is, when you do listen, you're listening for their language, you're listening to the things that they like, you're listening to the topics or the subjects they like, kind of thing, right? But you're also then be able to reflect that back when you're selling, when you're offering them something. And I think that's really important, even in selling from stage.
Yeah. And all this is totally spot on. And what's funny is that we haven't even touched on just like the actual pure joy of that you feel when you're being heard. Like people just love to be listened to, like people want that because there's so much going on. There's so much, so many things trying to get our attention. There's so much distractions in the world. So it's like, I think people really appreciate being heard. And so that like genuine human need on top of all the other things, I think makes improv such a dynamic tool for speakers and business people.
Yeah, I think you're so right, because you might be the only person that's ever really truly listened to them. And that is a gift,
Maybe.
right? I think even in Clubhouse, thinking about that, some people that are like, oh, I've never got up here and spoke before. And it's like, well, great. We're excited to have you. Like, awesome. And it's like, why haven't you spoke before? Right. And it's because they're afraid to be heard, because there's no other distractions but one person's sound at a time on that app. Right. And so it really gives people this place of like, oh my gosh, there's a whole bunch of people hearing me right now. And really, some people might be really listening, some might be eating breakfast and listening, but it's that powerful thing. And to just give somebody a space to be heard is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree.
So if I just show up on one of your improv classes, what would be some of the things we would go over?
Yeah. So every class starts off with some sort of warm-up exercise that gets everyone on the same page, because everyone's coming from different spots in their life, different times of day for different people, whatever. So some sort of warm-up that will challenge our brains a little bit, maybe our bodies some, just to get us on the same page. And a cool thing about improv is if you pick the right exercises to do, or if you create the right exercises, they're going to be fun, and they're going to like teach you something, and it's going to be something that you can like replicate on your own in some way. So we do some sort of warm-up exercise. Then I would do a like something that was a little bit more geared towards a specific perspective. Like, okay, now we're going to practice listening. Now we're going to practice heightening. Now we're going to practice brainstorming. And then I actually have people do improv scenes together. Like, you would do an improv comedy scene with someone, like no script, you interacting back and forth. I would give you notes and feedback, like help nip and tuck, where like the quote unquote mistakes were. Because remember, there are no mistakes, there are only gifts. And then by the end of the session, you would be doing improv comedy scenes. You would be witnessing the process. You would have made yourself laugh. You would have laughed at other people, and you would leave it with some tangible takeaways like, wow, now I know to think about, if this is true, then what else is true? Now I know how to play with patterns when putting together my speech. Now I know how to break the ice at the networking event afterwards, or whatever. It's very applicable to so many walks of life. So I know that was a little on the vague side because I didn't tell you the specific exercises, but that is what we would do. And if you want, we could do a specific exercise right now if you wanted, Erin.
Let's do it. I'm always down.
Oh my God, she's down, y'all. All right. So let's do a warm-up one. Okay. Let's do a
Okay.
quick, easy warm-up one. This is called 7 things. Okay, Erin? The way it works is I'm going to ask you one question and you're going to answer it 7 different ways. Okay. So the question is going to be something that is like that's not factual, because I don't want you in your head thinking about, am I doing this right? So I'm not going to say like, Erin, name seven senators that were born on the West Coast. I don't want you being like, what in the hell?
I would say I don't know any.
Yeah. So I want you
End
to
of
be
scene.
right. I want you to be able to like freely create and not have that filter that is judging everything. So I'm going to ask you something that's like, Erin, what are 7 things you wish would fit on a taco? Or Erin, make up 7 TV shows that don't exist. So that basically there's not a wrong answer, right? So then after everything that you say, I'm going to say yes. I'm going to keep count for you. Okay. So you say something, I go yes. You say something else, I go yes. Your job is to just lose yourself in it and just know that whatever you say is right. Cool?
Okay. Totally cool.
All right. I love it. All right. Erin, why don't you make up 7 names for conferences?
Okay, the Shaking Hands Conference,
Yes.
the Pizza Entrepreneur Summit,
Yes.
the Dog Walking Summit,
Yes.
the Secretaries of America Conference,
Yes.
the what'd you say, the senators of the funniest senators on the planet conference.
Yes. Give me 2 more.
The Potato Salad Conference.
Yes.
And the Pink Pillow Anonymous Conference.
Yes. Awesome. Great job. So basically what we're promoting in the exercise is this idea that you need to just show up, give yourself the gift of showing up, and try your best to take away that filter that's like, am I being smart enough? Am I being funny enough? Am I being, just like, nope, not about that right now. It's about showing up and just doing the work. And I'm chanting yes for you because we also want to have a culture of backhabbing. We want you to feel like I'm taking care of you from where I am. So imagine a room full of people all going, yes, yes. It feels very hype,
Yeah.
And so it's important to get into a flow state. It helps kind of manufacture that a little bit,
Yeah.
It also helps you start to understand and wrap your brain around the culture of saying yes and going with stuff. Comedically, there's like a third bonus thing here, because I think when your brain has to do the same thing 7 times, you eventually get tired of having to create over and over again. And so you start to get to some really weird, interesting places towards the end. And so like when you get to like thing 5, 6, 7, you're kind of like, I'm still doing this. I got to say like 2 more things. And you're like at the bottom of your energies. And like that's often where really funny stuff comes from. So the more that you do this, the more you would be able to like instantly tap into things 5, 6, 7 and just kind of live there and like the weirdest, most craziest version of your perspective. So there's a lot going on in that one. It's like a really easy, simple exercise. But as you can see, each exercise like that is fun. It's potentially funny. And you're walking away from that being like, wow, that's a lot to think about.
Yeah.
That's a lot to think about from just that silly 7 things. Also, not to mention, I would insist on speaking at every single one of these conferences if you would have me.
Of course, I'm producing them all. Oh my God, the Potato Salad Conference. That was awesome. I have no idea where that came from. Right?
That's
the fun part. Just, I think you're right. It does help people to get out of their own heads. So many of us live up here, and and there's so many people that think there's a right and a wrong way. I was on a retreat this weekend, and all these women were thinking there was a right way to do the exercises. There's a right way to say it. I was like, oh my God, the right and wrong in this room, right? And I feel that with women a lot. I've done women's leadership conferences, and it's still like the wanting to be the good girl, wanting to have it right, wanting to be the smart one, want to, and so it's interesting that in that, like, you can even hear your own thoughts. I'm like, okay, where am I going to go? And I was like, the last one, I had no idea. I saw a pink pillow across the room. I was like, that's it. Right. Because I was seriously, like you said, your brain's like, I have to do another one. Like, where am I going to find something? And so, but it just gets you out of the way, and it was fun. I was laughing through the whole entire thing myself, so that's also a really good mood change. So I love this because I think taking improv classes could really lift a lot of the negativity on the planet right now.
Absolutely. I mean, you nailed it. That's a really good take on what we just did. It gets you out of your head, improves mood, it gets you into flow. The culture of yes starts getting in there. I mean, it's
Yeah.
really so much so. And that was one very easy to execute little exercise. So just imagine how much deeper it goes when you let it, like how much more you'll learn if you like throw yourself into it. And that's one of the reasons why I'm such a big fan of the art form.
Yeah, and I think it really gets you to think, like, after that, and I'm like, oh, the old naked ladies in their negligees conference, right? Like, and my brain's still thinking of all these funny things, right? So it starts to actually get you to unlock that different side of your brain and to really flow with that, and to be more open to other ideas and to random things that come in. So I really like that because it really did get me out of my own way. I'm pretty good at doing that, but it just is, it's a fun way of doing it. I think for
Yeah,
people who are really stuck up here, this is the key.
absolutely. Absolutely. There are so many studies about what happens to the adult brain when it stops being playful and stops being creative. And for a lot of us, like an improv class would fix all that. It's like you would be challenged enough creatively, you would be smiling and laughing, often with strangers, having
Yeah.
fun. You would be doing something that challenged your creativity, and not even mentioning like the self-improvement aspects of it, like the way that you would become a better listener, brainstormer, writer, speaker. So there really is, it's a pretty thick art form. There's
Yeah.
a lot going on with it.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. So, as a speaker, how can you incorporate some of these things into a talk? Right? Maybe you have your talk. This is my signature talk, but how can you add some fun things? I mean, I always love adding the interactivity with the audience. I'm not a monologue speaker. I like to dialogue with people and get people to raise their hands, shake their heads, that kind of thing. So we're all on the same page here. But at the same time, how can I incorporate some of those things? If I already have, like, this is my thing, how do I add more? How do I add some of those dimensions, do you think?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, I mean, you could do one of these improv exercises with the audience as almost like a halftime for your speech, and when I'm helping people, when I'm coaching them to create comedy scenes, I often refer to scenes as a song. Like, what's the verse and what's the chorus? The chorus is the component that we keep revisiting over and over again, just like a song. It's repeatable, it's catchy, and it tells us what the hell's going on. So maybe having a verse and chorus to your speech. What's the chorus here? Is it something that the audience can wrap their heads around, like join in on reciting? Is there some way to, like, will that help with the energy of your talk? Yeah, stuff like that. I think that there's
Yeah.
all kinds of ways.
It's almost like the when, and I can't remember, there's a name for it, but like Brandon Burchard does it a lot. It's like, turn to your neighbor, shake and say, glad you're here. And turn to the neighbor, shake and glad you're here. And you get everyone to touch each other, which normally probably wouldn't happen in a conference. They're all trying to move their chairs so that they have enough space to sit. But to get in someone else's space and to just, and give permission. You didn't ask permission to these two people, but since we're all doing it, there's like this consent that happens,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
love that.
Yeah, I love thinking about ways that you can do that. I also thinking about it from the perspective of an event producer. It's really important to have someone like you in because, and or even if you are a speaker and you do part of it, and then you have your halftime, like you said, do some improv, fun stuff together, then come back and finish your talk. You just added so much more interconnectivity with the entire audience, more relatability as well, and it just gives that the talks because you could be sitting there, you might be the fourth speaker and there hasn't been a break or any of that, right? And so you get to shift the energy. And I always say that that would be great if you walk into a room and you got all the doomy people. Then you can really like, okay, we're gonna stand up. Let's everybody stand up, go give 5 high fives or whatever. Like even something like that, just to shake up the energy. When they, by the time they sit down, they've high fived some people, have a smile on their face. They sit down, they have more energy, right? So it just adds a deeper layer of connectivity into any kind of conference. And so I think it would be a lot of fun to have.
Yeah, and also to combine a thing we said previously, if you were present for the rest of the conference and if you were listening, like don't do the one that the person before you did if they did one. Like imagine if the speaker before you did the same thing. So you get up there and you're like, all right, I'm gonna shake the energy up. Get up and high five. Everyone's like, the last guy did that. It's like, dang it, I wish I was listening. So you want it to be like your pure perspective. You want it to be very organic and you also want to be a good listener. So all these things are constantly at play here, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's really essential as a speaker. You need to be sitting in the rooms. Don't think you're so high and mighty that you're going to get on stage, you're going to get off stage, and everyone's going to want your stuff, and then you're going to disappear. It's not that easy. It really
Dude,
is getting to
it's
know
the
the
same
people.
thing. Same thing like a stand-up comedy show. It's like a very common thing is like if there's a headliner in town who's like the person everyone's coming to see, it's like you don't want to do stuff that they would normally do. So you avoid that. But also you want to be in the room anyway, because what if the person before you did crowd work and was like talking to the person in the front row, like, look at this guy with this hat. And you didn't hear that, and you go up there and you're like, well, look at this guy with the hat. The audience is like, dude, we
Already
already
done.
did this. It's already been done, and now you're tanked. So it's like being a good listener and being very present is so key. So
Yeah,
key.
and I think that's I never thought about it, but improv is really about being in the present moment.
Yeah, that is probably the number one reason why professionals take improv classes. Not because they want to start doing comedy shows, although many end up pursuing it in some way if they want to, but it's because you want to learn how to be present. You want to learn how to be in the moment. And there's not a more fun way to practice being in the moment than taking an improv class.
I love that. It's totally true. I mean, my kids are the thing that get me really present, but it's also like I think that's a really because I think a lot of us are spinning out up here. And so you can get stuck in that. And if you actually start using this and going to improv and doing that, like, here's how I bring myself to present moment right now. I got to be in my present moment. I got to be in the present moment. Because I could be sitting here thinking about all the laundry list of things I need to do, or I could actually sit here and actually be listening to you and having a conversation. And listening is a part of a conversation. If you were on mute, I would have no idea what you're saying back to me. How am I going to continue the conversation? Right? Like it's really important to listen and be able to hear and know where to drive people and where the conversation can go.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Aaron.
I love it. I just think this is so much fun. So I know that you're going to offer a freebie, and so we'll have the link for that. And do you want to tell them a little bit about like what we're going to be doing? Some fun things we can do during the live as well. That you're going to do a live workshop during the summit.
Yeah, so I am going to use that same structure I mentioned earlier. We're going to do a formal warm up. You might have a leg up if you're watching this because we might be doing 7 things. It's a really good one to do with the group. I'm going to teach you an exercise that will promote listening and finding pattern work. I'm going to show you the classic improv exercise of yes and, the classic philosophy, which is yes, comma, and. I'll give you a little sneak peek right now. It's basically a communication hack that allows you to let your scene partner feel heard and to build on top of it. It's saying yes to them, and the and is adding on top of it. Basically, Aaron and I, this entire conversation, have been yes anding each other, which is why it's like boom, boom, boom. It's like we each bring a brick at a time. By the time we're done, we built this beautiful house. Like it was never Erin bringing a bunch of bricks while I'm just like looking at her. It was never me just saying nice bricks or bringing a half brick. It was like brick, 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 brick. That's the way good communication works. So I'm going to teach you an exercise that promotes that called yes and there'll be plenty of time for you to ask questions about how this applies to what you're doing and what's the next step. How do I do more of this? But yeah, I'm really, really looking forward to it. I love teaching this stuff to new people, and I'm very excited about the event.
I love it. And I think if anybody that's listening on here has their own summit, has events, you should bring in Chris, because like, you can see the level of complexity and interaction and all the things that he can bring to the stage, which is really going to help your audience as well. And I love the yes and, because in the yes and, that's your life. You can say yes and I have some boundaries around that. Yes and I'll do above and beyond. Yes and, like, if you could see the world more in that space, the possibilities, because your brain opens up to the possibilities. What else is out there, right? It doesn't keep you in the
Yeah,
focused, right? It's not either
absolutely.
or. It's yes and you can have that.
It's like, yes, I heard what you said. I understand it. You are heard. And here's my response to that, or here's me adding on top of it. It just is a way to have a structured approach to good communication. For anyone listening to this right now or watching this who is like, yeah, that sounds like normal conversations. Like, well, good. You're thinking about your very best friends, your very best business partners. I hope that you have that. This is more for people who you maybe butt heads with or who you feel aren't listening to you. Those are the people who you need to have a yes and technique for. And if you are yes anding them, maybe it'll rub off on them. Maybe those people who you have a hard time communicating with will take a cue from you and your new improv self and be a good communicator back.
I can hear that, because I can hear that if my husband's stuck in a thought, I could say yes and just to open it up. And if you did that enough, they can't fight it anymore, because you're not fighting them. You're just being, I heard you. I think that's great. And right. And so I think that that's a brilliant way of thinking about it in all communication, like you said.
Totally. What do you think is the opposite of a yes and? It's no, but.
But
It's like, so think about how often, I mean, some of us do this, we don't realize it, but no, but is kind of like saying, no, I don't have time for your idea, or no, I'm not listening to your idea, or no, that idea is not happening, but you listen to my idea now, but you make my idea the idea. And that's just a recipe for conflict, and conflict can be tough.
and that's what the world is facing right now. It has been for the last year, right? It's like, if we could have more yes and conversations, it would make the world a better place.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I have this question that I always ask. And so it talks about my future self. So my future self is ELJ. She sat under the tree with Oprah. She's the New York Times bestselling author. She's done all the things. So when I need confidence, I borrow it from her. When I need some advice, I bring her in and say, what would you do? Because she's already past this. She doesn't have the same mindset that I do, right? So stepping into more of that to create it in life. So I would ask, if your future self came here today, what would he tell you?
Okay, well, the first thing he would say is check out this really incredible converted Sprinter van that I have that you get to travel around the country in as soon as you make it happen. So that'd be the first thing. I'd be like, wow, that's incredible. I'm looking forward to that. But I think he would say, like, go in harder on the things that you are the most passionate about, and this new life where you are like, the conference is almost replacing the comedy festival in terms of things that I'm pursuing. Like, keep doing that. Like keep pursuing these things that will allow you to impact more people, and where you can also learn from more people and be a part of a community that is prioritizing self-improvement and community. And I think that's what he would say. And then he would honk his horn in the Sprinter van, and which is like, I guess maybe it's operated on like plants. He's not, his carbon footprint is still pretty low. He's like honking as he pulls away, and he's driving to wherever he wants to go drive. Maybe to beautiful Idaho, maybe to the California coast, maybe up to Michigan. Who knows? But I'm going to wave bye to him and say, Thank you for your time. I'll see you so soon.
I love that. I always feel like that question always pulls out some really good nuggets for people because it gets people out of their head and into,
Yeah.
ooh, what would that say? So I guess I add a little improv to all my interviews.
Yeah. Of
That's awesome.
course, of course. Imagine you asking that at the beginning of the conversation, like to the wrong person. It's like puts them in their head, right? But it's like now there's momentum and there's like a shared perspective and like a clear dynamics. And so it's like, oh yeah, now let's go. Ask me the weird questions, you know?
Right. Well,
Yeah,
and there's no right answer. It's just an answer, right?
exactly.
Like you said, you don't have to have a right answer. It's just an answer.
Right. Love that.
This is awesome. Well, thank you so much. I just can't wait. Like the opportunity to have him do some of this stuff live with us is going to be phenomenal. So you don't want to miss that session. We're going to have that coming up, but I am just so grateful to have you here. Thank you so much, Chris, for bringing such a unique perspective and vision on how we can change, how we show up on stage, how we show up in our lives and communication, and how we literally can live a better life by saying yes and.
Aaron, I loved it. This was so much fun. I'm looking forward to the event and thank you all so much for watching. I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Yes. Well, stay tuned for the next session and we'll see you on stage.